All right, hello everyone. As I said, my name is Derek Wilson, and I am presenting over Gaming as a Path to Sexual Assault, a content analysis of fan comments in response to virtual reality sexual assault discussion. That's a really big title for saying I read some comments about a podcast. So a little bit of background first of all. The podcast I watched came from a group called Funhaus, which is a gaming commentary group mostly known for comedy commentary and playing, testing, and marketing video games. What the podcast that they do is called Dude Soup, and it is a little bit more of a serious discussion. It talks about pop culture issues as well and how they relate to video games. So the game in question is called Dead or Alive, and it's a game known for its sexualization of women that are anime women, which an anime woman is basically described as a cartoon made to look real, but still with very cartoonistic features, and generally do have very sexualized features, both the men and women. This game is available on a platform called the PlayStation Virtual Reality feature, and virtual reality is the new mode in gaming in which your sight, your sound, and your movements are all part of the gaming experience. So it gives full immersion. What you hear is only what's in the game. What you see is a 3D version of what the game is, and then your movements also control the character themselves. So and I hate to call it this, but it's a feature in Dead or Alive, allows you to sexually assault a female character. And basically what this comes down to is poking, prodding, and touching the character in the game. And this is, you are doing this with your own movements, while she is saying things that basically translate to, no, I do not like it, please stop, I do not want this. So the problem is that video games are a main source of socialization. That there's plenty of studies out there that can find different sides of it supports it good, it supports it bad, but either way, it can tell that video games do socialize those who play it, and those who experience the advertising as well. The message that Funhaus had was that VR could potentially cause socialization of sexual assault, but it could give those who have issues with desire for sexual assault an outlet that does not involve another human being. Now, this a little bit of backstory on the podcast. This is actually the thumbnail. So this is what you would see if you wanted to watch the video. And the video that the podcast was in was actually called VR Sex Gone Too Far, with a lot of question marks. So some of the previous research that I discovered was all basically discussing how video games can socialize those who play it and those who are involved with them. The first part I found actually had to deal with when you saw somebody who was sexualized in a video game, you actually became more numb to sexual assault. It almost normalized sexual assault to those who had seen it. Second piece I found was that men outnumber women as far as performing violence in video game advertisements. That's a 3-to-1 ratio, which also leads into that sexism and misogyny is a common occurrence in video game portrayals of men and women, and that 70% of households are actually exposed to this. So that's over 70% of the US population is exposed to this misogyny and sexism from video games. A classic example of this is if you imagine a male character wearing armor. The more armor they get, the more higher level they go, and they get more armor, more masculine looking metal, whereas women often will get less and less clothing as they become a higher level in the games. One of the philosophies that Funhaus discussed in the podcast was that sexual assault had been hypothesized as an attempt to fill psychological needs, as in there's a psychological disorder that causes somebody to want to sexually assault someone. And it's obviously not for every case, but there are some cases where they question whether or not that could be a reason. The only thing I could find on this was nested ecological theory, which is a psychological theory that states the desire for different forms of assault come from an ontogenetic level and how our individual habits shape our behaviors. And it's not an exact fit, but it was the closest thing I could find that related to it. So my research questions were, how do fans of a humor-based group respond to a serious discussion? And then even further in detail, how do fans respond to the message that was given by Funhaus concerning sexual assault in a virtual reality game, and then what kind of comments will fans leave if they agree or disagree with the message. So my theoretical approach for this was definitely general feminist conflict theory. It was looking at sexualization of women, and also that in the game the women are portrayed as not knowing what they want, and only you as the character can really decide what they want in the game. So it's basically taking a lot of power away from the women and portrayal of women in the game and giving it to whoever is playing the video game. And I probably should note that in virtual reality, you never see the character you play as. Basically, if you were to look at it in the game, looking at the character that you're playing as, it's basically just a head and hands. There's no gendering to the character at all. So my methods, this was unobtrusive. Anyone who commented on the videos had to already sign an agreement and make an account to basically leave whatever comments they want behind. I've obtained a full comment list from both video outlet sources. It came from youtube.com as well as roosterteeth.com, which is the sister company of Funhaus. I created a coding system based on the responses, and of course re-edited the coding system as I read through more and more comments and found more and more patterns. I collected 50 comments that had an actual response. Sometimes on YouTube people will respond to videos and they have nothing to do with the video whatsoever. So I did have to throw some of those comments out from the random number generator and pick ones that actually had a relation to the message. And then once coding was done, I found commonalities based on the responses. So the most numerous response was a positive response. Positive as in they liked the video, they found it interesting, they liked the discussion that Funhaus members had. There was not a whole lot of content to it as far as other than just saying we liked it. This came from both newcomers to Funhaus as well as long-term fans. And you can see some of the examples that they say, intellectually stimulating, they're glad that they're not afraid to discuss it. And my favorite one over there is that gender representation in games is something scarcely talked about by level-headed people, and it's good to see it becoming a strong conversational point. I guess that popped down a little bit. So my second most numerous response was attacking or targeting responses. This is where commenters would choose to attack or target a specific population. What surprised me most was it was not just Funhaus, but it was actually other cultures and populations as well. Japanese culture was common as well as Americans, and then people who would or would not play the game were targeted for attacking comments. One interesting part that did come from the attacking comments was that many people made assumptions of Japanese culture, stating things like, it's okay to sexually assault people in Japan, it's part of their culture, it's more like a role-playing thing than it is actual sexual assault, which very clearly we know sexual assault is very serious in any situation. What I actually found on that research, because I did do a little research afterwards to see what that was, and the only evidence I could find scholarly-wise was that there was a rape issue in a military setting in which it was initially written off as an expressive release for the male soldiers to rape the female soldiers, but that was eventually even condoned by higher-ups in the military and said this was definitely not supported or allowed at all in the military. And then you can see some of their stop blaming the world around you. Men in Japan are supposed to dominate their female counterparts, as I said, an example for that. And then the third most numerous was defensive responses. These were almost always accompanied by an attacking response, so they would attack a population, then defend themselves. Also accompanied by teaching children statements, which I'll get to here in a second. What was really interesting about defensive responses is that they included self-evaluation. They were mostly looking at how they would be affected by the game and then expecting everyone else to be affected in the exact same way they were. And you can see down here, there's a huge difference, though, between violence, fighting, and sexual and violence. So that was more of a neutral one. Over here, I played games for as long as I can remember, in my opinion, and they haven't warped my view on people at all. And so you can see just a lot of those. It didn't bother me, you know, I don't go around killing people in real life because I do it in GTA. Some other comments that were coded worth noting. I did have to separate sexist and attacking comments because there were so many sexist comments or they were attacking, but they were specifically targeting the opposite gender. And you can see down there, I think women are tough enough and aware enough of reality that they would know it's just a game. What I really find interesting is that this comment basically removes any female's right to be mad about a game about sexually assaulting a woman, and it's putting the blame on them for there being an issue with it. Teaching children comments, these were actually probably the most content heavy, although not the most numerous. They created the most discussion, and they always had to do a lot with teaching children, putting it on the parents or whoever the guardians are in order to influence their children not to play a game or to understand the difference between virtual reality in a game and actual reality in real life. And then cannibalism or distraction comments. What I found really funny about this part is that there was a 40-second discussion in the podcast in which they discussed cannibalism and whether or not cannibalism was legal if somebody had given consent beforehand. And out of that 40-second discussion of an hour-long podcast, it created numerous comments about people who went out, researched the legality of consented cannibalism, and then made comments about it. Had very little relation to sexual assault, but I just found it very interesting that a lot of people spent time and sent them off into a tangent. So some of my limitations for this, obviously, is a very small sample size. I was constricted to a class time for a semester for a pilot project. Consistency of internet commenters is not always a very good thing to go off of. Commenters, as I said, they'll leave funny comments, they'll leave other comments that have nothing to do, or they'll try to make people laugh and they have no actual real force behind what they're saying. That's not their actual belief. And then a commenter's lack of knowledge or exposure. Some people might not have been very knowledgeable on socialization of gaming. They might not have been knowledgeable on the game they were commenting on, or even might not have even watched the whole podcast before commenting their opinion. One limitation I did not discuss is this is all obviously very heteronormative in analysis. It gives only a lot of the articles I read, the comments had to do with male sexually assaulting a female examples, and there was not a lot of discussion backwards the other way of same-sex sexual assault or women sexually assaulting men. So what does it all mean? As we saw earlier, VR could potentially cause socialization of sexual assault, but it could give those who have issues with desire for sexual assault an outlet that does not involve another human being. The message was well received by fans and random viewers. They liked it. There was the most numerous comment coded. Other than the attacking comments, the messages created discussion. Very much so, those who believe that teaching children was the ultimate way as far as giving a solution to the social issue of socialization of gaming. Teaching children was the best given response as far as you need to teach the children the difference between the game and reality, and that's how you're going to stop them from being socialized by video games. That's not to say it might or might not work, but that is what the commenters believed. So future research I might go to from this, definitely I would like to look at different demographics and the level of gaming socialization in which they would have. Mostly I would consider looking at this as I would assume that higher socioeconomic status is people who can afford more video games, especially as video game consoles become more and more expensive. They're probably going to be more socialized, is what my hypothesis would be. And then I would like to look at response provocation for minor statements in an internet forum setting, going back to the cannibalism and distraction. Can we get somebody off on a tangent out of an hour-long discussion from like a 40-second comment?